The message came without warning on a quiet Tuesday morning. Every screen on Earth, Mars, and the outer colonies lit up at the same moment. Admiral Daniel Pierce was drinking his morning coffee in the command center of Earth's orbital defense station when the hologram appeared in front of him. The creature that materialized was tall and strange, with skin that seemed to shift colors like oil on water. It spoke in a voice that sounded like it came from everywhere at once. "I am Counselor Vexnar of the Galactic Council," the alien said. "We speak for 47 civilized species across this galaxy. We have been watching your kind for 300 of your years. We have seen enough." Lieutenant Kate Morrison, who was monitoring the communication station, looked over at Pierce with worry in her eyes. The Admiral said nothing. His face showed no emotion as he watched the alien continue its speech. "Your species has been expanding too quickly. You build weapons instead of seeking peace. You take territory that does not belong to you. You ignore the rules that keep order in this galaxy. The Council has made a decision. You will stop building warships immediately. You will abandon all colonies beyond your home solar system. You will accept our guidance and supervision. You have 30 days to obey these commands." The alien paused, and its eyes seemed to look directly at Pierce, even though this was just a recording sent across space. "This is your final warning. Obey us or we will force you to obey. The Council has spoken." The hologram vanished. The command center was silent for several seconds. Everyone looked at Admiral Pierce, waiting to see what he would do. He set down his coffee cup very carefully and turned to Commander Greg Hamilton, his tactical officer. "Get me a connection to Geneva. The world leaders need to see this right now." Within an hour, every government on Earth had received the recording. Within 3 hours, emergency meetings were happening in every capital city. By evening, representatives from every nation had gathered in a secure facility deep under the mountains of Switzerland. Secretary General Liu Wei called the meeting to order, but everyone was already shouting. "They want us to give up everything we've built," said Ambassador Claire Bennett from the United States. 3 centuries of space exploration gone. All our colonies abandoned. And they expect us to just say yes? "They have 47 species backing them," replied a representative from the European Union. "We're one species. One planet, really. How can we fight that?" General Nathan Cole from the United Earth Defense Force stood up. He was an older man with gray hair and scars on his face from the Mars Rebellion 20 years ago. "They can have 47 species or 400. Doesn't matter. They're asking us to kneel. I say we tell them where they can stick their ultimatum." The debate went on for hours. Some people wanted to negotiate. Some wanted to find a compromise. Others wanted to fight. But as the sun rose over the Swiss Alps the next morning, something unexpected happened. Everyone agreed. Every nation, every political faction, every group that normally fought each other about everything found themselves on the same side. They would not obey. Admiral Pierce received the official response 3 days later. It came on plain white paper printed in simple black letters. Every world leader had signed it. Pierce read the message once, then read it again. Then he smiled for the first time since the alien's message had arrived. He called Lieutenant Morrison over to his station. "Send this message to the Galactic Council. Use every frequency we have. Make sure they can't miss it." Morrison looked at the paper. Her eyes went wide. "Sir, are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Send it." The message went out across space on every radio frequency, every quantum channel, every method of communication humanity had invented. It would take time to reach the Council, but it would get there eventually, and when the aliens read it, they would understand exactly where humanity stood. The message contained only 2 words: "Make us." Around Earth, the defense stations began powering up their weapons. On Mars, the factories started working overtime. In the asteroid belt, miners began converting their ships for combat. On the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, the colonies started building shelters and stockpiling supplies. Humanity had given its answer. Now they had to be ready for what came next. Commander Helen Foster was in charge of the Neptune Defense Wing, the outermost military position in the solar system. She stood on the bridge of her ship, the Cerberus, and watched her crew prepare for war. These were good people. Engineers, pilots, weapons officers. Most of them were young. None of them had ever been in a real battle. "Do you think they'll actually come?" her first officer asked. Foster looked out at the cold darkness of space. "Yes, they'll come. And when they do, We'll show them what happens when you threaten Earth. Back on the homeworld, life continued in a strange way. People went to work. Children went to school. But everyone knew war was coming. The news channels talked about nothing else. Some people were scared. Some were angry. But very few thought humanity should surrender. In a bar in New York City, a group of off-duty soldiers watched the news coverage. One of them raised his glass to Admiral Pierce and his two-word reply. The others raised their glasses too. "Make us," they said together and drank. On the lunar surface, construction crews were building new weapons platforms. These weren't pretty machines. They were ugly, brutal things designed for one purpose: to kill enemy ships. The crew chief, a woman named Betty Parker, watched another platform come online and nodded with satisfaction. "Let them come," she muttered. "We'll be ready." Deep in the Pacific Ocean, submarines that had been retrofitted with space-capable missiles ran final tests. In the Sahara Desert, railgun batteries aimed at the sky. In orbit around Venus, automated defense drones activated their weapon systems and began patrol patterns. Humanity was preparing for the biggest fight in its history. They were outnumbered. Their technology was probably inferior, but they had something the Galactic Council didn't understand. They had 5,000 years of human history teaching them one lesson over and over again: never surrender. Admiral Pierce stood alone in his quarters late that night, looking down at Earth. The planet was beautiful from up here, blue and white and green. Worth fighting for, worth dying for if necessary. His communication panel beeped. It was a message from his daughter, a civilian living in Tokyo. "Dad, everyone's talking about what you did. About what you said to the aliens. I'm scared. But I'm also proud. Don't let them push us around." Pierce smiled and sent a message back. "I won't, honey. I promise, 30 days. That's all the time they had before the Galactic Council would make good on their threat. 30 days to prepare. 30 days to get ready. 30 days until humanity found out if courage and determination could overcome superior numbers and technology. The clock was ticking. Part 2. The Galactic Council received humanity's response with complete shock. Councillor Vexinar had called an emergency meeting in the Grand Chamber, a massive space station built around a neutron star at the center of the galaxy. Delegates from dozens of species filled the hall, their various forms creating a bizarre collection of shapes and colors. They said no, Vexinar announced, still unable to believe it. Not only did they refuse our terms, they challenged us directly. A delegate from the Kreth Dominion, a species that looked like living crystal, spoke up. Its voice made a sound like breaking glass. "This has never happened before. Every emerging species accepts council authority. It's simply how things work. Maybe they don't understand what we can do to them," suggested another delegate. This one was from the Nefara Collective, a race of beings that looked like floating clouds of gas. "Perhaps they need a demonstration." Ambassador Torvin, a reptilian creature from the Saukar Empire, shook his large head. "No, I've been studying their broadcasts and communications. They understand perfectly. They just don't care. These humans are different from anything we've encountered. Different or not, they must be dealt with," Vexinar declared. "Prepare the enforcement fleet. We will teach them the cost of defying the Council." While the aliens argued and planned, humanity was busy. On Mars, the shipyards were running day and night. Captain Jake Sullivan walked through the construction bay, where the newest carrier was being built. The ship was called the Defiant, and Sullivan thought the name fit perfectly. It wasn't a beautiful ship. It was covered in weapons, armor plating, and missile tubes. It looked mean and angry, which was exactly what humanity needed right now. "How long until she's ready?" Sullivan asked the chief engineer. 2 weeks, maybe less if we keep up this pace. The crew is working triple shifts voluntarily. Everyone wants to help, Sullivan nodded. Around the solar system, similar scenes were playing out. On Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, Dr. Lisa Zhang was overseeing weapons testing deep under the ice. The new plasma torpedoes had exceeded all expectations. They burned hot enough to cut through almost anything. "Send the results to Earth Command," she told her assistant. "Tell them we're ready to go into production immediately." In the asteroid belt, miners had become soldiers almost overnight. Frank Martinez had spent 30 years mining rocks in space. Now he was commanding a small fleet of mining ships that had been converted into warships. They weren't pretty and they weren't official military, but they could fight. "My grandfather came to the belt with nothing but a dream," Martinez told his crew during a briefing. "He built everything we have here with his own hands. No alien is going to tell us we can't be here. We're going to show them that the belt belongs to us." His crew cheered. They were tough people who had lived hard lives in space. Now they would prove that toughness in combat. The Galactic Council's enforcement fleet gathered at a rally point 20 light-years from Earth. 300 warships from 24 different species created a sight that would have terrified most civilizations. High Admiral Corvesh of the Atalan hegemony was in command. He was a large, insect-like being with multiple eyes and a voice that clicked and buzzed. "Review the battle plan," he ordered his officers. "We will strike their orbital defenses first, disable their communications, and force a quick surrender. Their technology is primitive. Their tactics are unrefined. This will be over quickly." But Captain Tessara of the scout ship Whisper wasn't so confident. She was from a species that looked like tall, thin cats, and she had been monitoring human communications for weeks. What she had seen worried her. "High Admiral, I must report something unusual. The humans show no signs of panic. No evacuation of their colonies. No riots or protests. Just preparation." "Of course they're preparing," Corvesh replied dismissively. "But preparation without adequate technology is meaningless. They will learn this lesson soon enough." Tessara wasn't convinced, but she said nothing more. She had learned that sometimes commanders needed to learn hard lessons for themselves. Back on Earth, Admiral Pierce stood in the command center with Colonel Ryan Phillips, his second in command. They were watching status reports come in from across the solar system. Every defense station was ready. Every ship was armed. Every weapon was loaded. "Do you think we can actually win this?" Phillips asked quietly. Pierce was silent for a moment, looking at the star map that showed the approaching Council fleet. "I think we're about to find out what happens when you corner a predator. Humans didn't get to the top of Earth's food chain by running away from fights. And if we lose?" Pierce's jaw became tight. "Then we make sure they never forget the cost. We make it so expensive to fight humans that no one will ever threaten us again. Even if we die, we send a message." Phillips nodded slowly. "No surrender." "No surrender," Pierce agreed. On the lunar base, Betty Parker and her construction crews had finished the last of the weapons platforms. These machines were essentially giant railguns that could throw metal slugs at incredible speeds. Simple technology, but devastating. Parker stood back and looked at her work with pride. "Beautiful, aren't they?" she said to her assistant. "They're weapons of war, Chief?" "Yeah, but they're our weapons of war. And soon we're going to show those council ships what human engineering can do." In Geneva, the world leaders met one final time before the battle began. Secretary General Liu Wei addressed them all via hologram, since there wasn't time for everyone to gather in person. "In a few days, possibly hours, the Council fleet will arrive. We've done everything we can to prepare. Now we must trust in our people, our technology, and our will to remain free. Whatever happens, remember this: we chose this path. We could have surrendered. We could have submitted. We chose to fight instead. That choice defines us." Ambassador Bennett from the United States spoke up. "There's something I want to add. We've sent a copy of our history to 12 hidden locations outside the solar system. If we lose, if Earth falls, those records will survive. Future generations will know that humanity didn't go quietly. They'll know we fought." The room was silent for a moment. Then General Cole said what everyone was thinking. "We're not going to lose. We're going to win. And then we're going to make sure the galaxy knows that humans don't take orders from anyone." More cheers. More determination. The meeting ended and everyone returned to their posts. Commander Helen Foster and the Neptune Defense Wing had been on high alert for days. They were running on stimulants and determination now, since there wasn't much time for sleep. Her crew had been training constantly, running simulation after simulation of the coming battle. "They're going to outnumber us badly," her tactical officer said during one briefing. "Maybe 10-1. "Then we make sure every shot counts," Foster replied. "We're the first line of defense. The Council fleet will have to go through us to reach Earth. So we're going to hurt them. We're going to make them bleed. And we're going to buy time for the rest of the fleet to prepare." Her crew looked tired but determined. They knew what was coming. They knew the odds. They didn't care. In a suburb of Beijing, a father tucked his daughter into bed. She looked up at him with worried eyes. "Daddy, are the aliens going to hurt us?" He smiled and brushed her hair back. "No, sweetie. Our military is going to protect us. Admiral Pierce and all the brave people in space are making sure we stay safe. But what if there are too many aliens? Then our people will fight harder. That's what humans do. We don't give up no matter what." The little girl thought about this for a moment, then nodded. Okay, tell the Admiral thank you. I will, honey. Now sleep. Everything will be all right. He left her room and went downstairs where his wife was watching the news. The reports were all about the coming battle. Estimates of when the Council fleet would arrive. Interviews with military experts. Everyone had an opinion, but no one really knew what would happen. Are we going to be okay? His wife asked. He sat down beside her and took her hand. I don't know. But I know we're going to fight. And that's enough. Across Earth, across Mars, across every human colony, the same conversations were happening. The same fears, the same determination, the same refusal to accept defeat before the battle had even begun. Admiral Pierce received the final reports just before midnight. Every station was ready. Every ship was in position. Every weapon was armed. Humanity had done everything possible to prepare. Now they just had to wait. The Galactic Council's fleet began moving toward the solar system. 300 warships with crews of thousands. They expected an easy victory. They expected humanity to break when faced with such overwhelming force. They were about to learn that humanity doesn't break easily. Part 3. The Galactic Council's enforcement fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, exactly 30 days after their ultimatum. High Admiral Corvesh stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Judgment, and studied the display screens with satisfaction. Everything was going according to plan. Report, he commanded. His sensor officer, a small creature with 6 arms, worked quickly at its station, detecting human vessels near their 4th and 5th planets. Approximately 60 large ships, many smaller ones. Defensive platforms active around the 3rd planet, which is their homeworld. Exactly as predicted, Corvesh said. They've gathered everything they have. Desperate but futile. Begin the advance. We'll sweep through their outer forces and then lay siege to Earth itself. The Council fleet moved forward in perfect formation. Ships from a dozen species, each different in design but united in purpose. They had been enforcing Council law for thousands of years. This would be just another routine operation. Or so they thought. As the fleet crossed the orbit of Neptune, the outermost planet, something strange appeared on the sensors. The technician monitoring the equipment looked confused. Hi, Admiral, I'm detecting heat signatures near the 8th planet, but I don't see any ships. Explain, Corvesh demanded. Before the technician could answer, space itself seemed to tear apart. Dozens of human warships appeared from nowhere, having been hidden in complete silence for days. They had been waiting in ambush, their systems shut down to avoid detection. Now they powered up all at once and attacked. Commander Helen Foster gave the order from the bridge of the Cerberus. All ships open fire. Hit them with everything. The ambush was brutal and efficient. The human ships fired railguns that sent metal slugs flying at incredible speeds. The Council ships barely had time to raise their shields before the first impacts tore through 3 vessels, ripping them apart. Then plasma torpedoes followed, brilliant streaks of superheated matter that burned through armor like it was paper. Evasive maneuvers. Corvesh screamed, his earlier confidence gone. Return fire immediately. The Council fleet scattered in confusion. They had expected a defensive battle, not an aggressive ambush. The humans weren't fighting fair. They weren't engaging in honorable combat. They were just killing as efficiently as possible. The human ships didn't stay in one place. They fired, moved, fired again. They targeted engines first to cripple ships, then weapons to disable them, then simply left the crippled vessels floating in space while they moved to the next target. It was cold, calculated violence. Captain Jake Sullivan brought his carrier, the Defiant, into the battle. The ship launched wave after wave of small drone fighters. Unlike the Council's piloted craft, these drones were purely machines. They didn't care about dying. They rammed into enemy ships, exploded themselves to destroy targets, and swarmed like angry insects. They're sending machines to die. One Council captain screamed over the communication channel. That's not honorable combat. Sullivan heard the transmission and smiled grimly. Yeah, that's the whole point. We keep our people safe while we destroy you. Welcome to human warfare. The battle raged for 6 hours. The Council fleet tried to regroup, tried to bring their superior numbers to bear, but the humans wouldn't let them. Every time the Council ships gathered, another ambush would hit from a different direction. The humans used the planets, the asteroids, even the sun's radiation to hide their movements. Captain Tassara, whose scout ship had survived by staying far from the main battle, watched in growing horror. They fight like predators, she whispered to herself. Not like civilized beings, like hunters. When the Council fleet finally managed to pull back and retreat to a safe distance, the damage reports came in. Corvesh stared at the numbers in disbelief. 47 ships destroyed. Another 30 damaged beyond immediate repair. The humans had lost only 9 ships. This isn't possible, Corvesh said. Their technology is supposed to be inferior. How did they do this? Tisara provided an answer, though she knew he wouldn't want to hear it. They don't fight the way we fight, High Admiral. We have rules about combat. We have traditions. They have one rule, win. There's a difference. Back in Earth's command center, Admiral Pierce watched the battle data with grim satisfaction. The first engagement had gone better than he had hoped, but he knew better than to celebrate. We drove them back, sir, Lieutenant Morrison said, hope clear in her voice. For now, Pierce replied. They'll regroup. They'll adapt. And they still have superior numbers. This war is just beginning. What we did today was send a message, nothing more. He was right. Even as the Council fleet regrouped at the edge of the solar system, messages were being sent across the galaxy. More ships were being diverted to the Sol system. The Council had been embarrassed by a primitive species. They would not let that stand. But humanity wasn't resting either. Engineers were already examining the wreckage of destroyed Council ships, learning everything they could about alien technology. The miners in the asteroid belt were moving their families to hidden shelters carved deep into rocks. On Mars, the factories doubled their production. Frank Martinez stood on the bridge of his converted mining ship, looking at the debris field from the battle. His crew had participated in the fight and survived. Now they were scanning the wreckage for anything useful. Look at this, his engineer said, showing Martinez a scan of a Council weapon system. Their energy weapons are powerful, but they recharge slowly. If we can dodge the first shot, we have a window to attack. Good, Martinez said. Pass that information to command. Every detail we learn might save lives in the next battle. On Earth, the victory was being celebrated in the streets. People gathered in city squares, cheering and crying with relief. But in the military command centers, there was no celebration. Just preparation for the next fight. General Nathan Cole met with his senior officers to discuss the battle. We hurt them today, but they're going to come back with more ships. Many more ships. We need to be ready. Our casualties were lighter than expected, one officer reported. We can replace the ships we lost within a few weeks. Do it faster, Cole ordered. I want every shipyard working around the clock. I want weapons production tripled. I want every defense platform upgraded. We won the first battle. Now we need to win the war. In the asteroid belt, construction crews were working on a secret project. They were attaching fusion engines to asteroids, turning huge rocks into weapons. If the Council came back, they would face not just ships but the solar system itself fighting against them. Dr. Lisa Zhang on Europa was developing new types of missiles. These would split apart as they flew, creating dozens of smaller warheads that could overwhelm point defense systems. Simple idea, but effective. Commander Helen Foster and her Neptune defense wing were being resupplied and reinforced. More ships were being sent to join her. The ambush had worked once, but it wouldn't work again. Next time, they would need different tactics. On the lunar base, Betty Parker was building more railgun platforms. These weapons were crude compared to alien technology, but they worked. And they could be built quickly and cheaply, which mattered more than elegance right now. Admiral Pierce stood in his quarters late that night, unable to sleep. He kept reviewing the battle data, looking for mistakes, trying to predict what the Council would do next. His door chimed and Colonel Phillips entered. You should rest, sir. Can't. We've poked the bear, Ryan. They're going to come at us with everything they have. Then we'll be ready. The crew knows what's at stake. Everyone in the system knows. We're not going to let Earth fall. Pierce nodded slowly. The problem is, I'm not sure ready is going to be enough. We won today because we surprised them. We ambushed them. We fought dirty. But they're not going to fall for that twice. Next time, they'll be prepared. So we prepare too. We adapt. That's what humans do best. Pierce managed a small smile. Yeah, that's what we do. We adapt. Across the solar system, humanity prepared for the coming storm. They knew the Council would return. They knew the next battle would be worse. But they also knew they had no choice. Surrender was not an option. Submission was not an option. In the Council's command ship, Corvesh was receiving orders directly from Counselor Vexnar. You will wait for reinforcements. When they arrive, you will attack again. This time you will not fail. Use overwhelming force. Show no mercy. The humans must be crushed. Yes, Counselor, but I must warn you, these humans are dangerous. They don't fight like any species we've encountered. Then adapt your tactics. You have superior technology and superior numbers. Use them. The Council's authority cannot be questioned. If one species refuses to submit, others will follow. Make an example of Earth. The transmission ended. Corvesh looked at his tactical officers. How long until reinforcements arrive? 2 weeks, High Admiral. They're bringing over 1,000 additional ships. Corvesh nodded. The humans had won the first battle. But the war was far from over. And the Council had much deeper resources than one small species fighting alone. The question was whether courage and determination could overcome superior numbers and technology. In 2 weeks, they would all find out. Part 4. 2 weeks after their defeat, the Galactic Council returned with overwhelming force. This time they brought 1,500 warships representing 31 different species. The fleet was so large it took hours for all the ships to emerge from hyperspace. Counselor Vexnar personally oversaw the operation from a command vessel positioned safely at the rear of the formation. This time there will be no mistakes. Vexnar announced to the assembled fleet commanders via holographic communication. No underestimation. We will demonstrate the full might of the Galactic Council. We will crush this rebellion completely. High Admiral Corvesh stood at attention during the briefing. He had been demoted after the first battle, but kept in command because he had learned valuable lessons about fighting humans. The humans will try to ambush us again. We must be ready for unconventional tactics. Then we will be unconventionally thorough, Vexnar replied coldly. Sweep every kilometer of space. Deploy sensor nets. Maintain defensive formations. And this time, do not fail. The massive Council fleet entered the solar system in a carefully coordinated assault. They were ready for ambushes this time. They sent drone scouts ahead. They swept space with powerful sensors. They kept their ships in tight defensive formations. They would not be caught off guard again. But humanity had been busy during those 2 weeks. Colonel Ryan Phillips commanded the Mars defensive grid from an underground command center. The red planet had been turned into a fortress. Orbital platforms bristled with weapons. Ground-based railguns pointed at the sky. Missile batteries were hidden in the rocky terrain. Phillips watched the approaching Council fleet on his displays and gave a simple order. Let them come to us. We're ready. The Council divided their forces according to a sound military plan. 500 ships would assault Earth directly. Another 500 would neutralize Mars. The remaining 500 would hunt down human ships scattered throughout the system and eliminate them one by one. It was a logical strategy that should have worked. The assault on Mars began with a massive orbital bombardment. Council ships rained energy weapons down on the surface, expecting the humans to surrender quickly when faced with such firepower. Instead, something unexpected happened. The missile batteries on Mars didn't fire simple rockets. They launched complex multi-stage weapons that split apart in flight, creating dozens of independent warheads. Each warhead could maneuver on its own, making them nearly impossible to shoot down. The Council's point defense systems designed for conventional missiles were overwhelmed within minutes. This is insane, one Council captain screamed as 3 of his escort ships exploded. How many missiles do they have? Dr. Lisa Zhang watched from her underground command center with cold satisfaction. More than enough. We've been building these for 2 weeks straight. Fire the next wave. Another 100 missiles launched from hidden silos across Mars. The Council ships tried to retreat to a safer distance, but the missiles followed them. The warheads were smart, patient. They waited for the perfect moment, then struck. On the other side of the solar system, Captain Jake Sullivan led a hit-and-run campaign that frustrated the Council forces to the point of rage. His ships never engaged in long battles. They would appear, fire everything they had, and vanish before the Council could respond effectively. They used asteroids for cover. They hid behind moons. They even skimmed dangerously close to the sun, where the radiation interfered with Council sensors. It's like fighting ghosts, one Council admiral complained to Corvesh. Every time we think we have them, they disappear. Then stop chasing them, Corvesh ordered. Focus on the primary objective. We take Earth and the rest of their forces become irrelevant. But the main battle was happening at Earth itself. And it was brutal. Admiral Pierce stood in the command center, watching 500 Council warships approach his homeworld. The odds were terrible. The Council expected Earth's defenders to retreat, to sue for peace before the bombardment destroyed their cities. Instead, Pierce activated every weapon, every defense, every system humanity had built. All units engage at will, he ordered calmly. Make every shot count. The battle for Earth was unlike anything the galaxy had seen in centuries. The humans fought with desperate intensity. Their orbital platforms fired until they overheated and exploded. Their ships rammed Council vessels when they ran out of ammunition. Their defense satellites crashed themselves into enemy formations, but Pierce had one more surprise prepared. Fire the rods, he ordered. From hidden facilities on the moon, massive weapons launched toward the Council fleet. These weren't sophisticated missiles or energy weapons. They were just metal rods, tungsten and titanium, accelerated to incredible speeds by magnetic rails. The technology was simple, crude even, but physics doesn't care about sophistication. The Council fleet's shields were designed to deflect energy weapons. They did almost nothing against solid matter moving at such velocities. The rods punched through ships like bullets through paper. Each impact released energy equivalent to a nuclear explosion. Within minutes, dozens of Council ships were destroyed or crippled. Commander Greg Hamilton watched the results with grim satisfaction. Sometimes simple is better. Can't hack a big metal rod. Can't jam it. Can't trick it. It just hits you and you die. The battle raged for 3 full days. It was the longest, bloodiest space battle in recorded history. The Council threw everything they had at Earth's defenses. The humans threw everything back. Orbital platforms were destroyed. Ships were lost. Parts of the defensive grid went dark. But humanity held. And then on the 3rd day, something changed. Frank Martinez and his belt miners had spent weeks preparing their contribution to the defense. Throughout the asteroid belt, hidden fusion reactors had been attached to hundreds of large asteroids. Now all at once they activated. The asteroids, some as large as mountains, began moving toward the Council fleet's positions. The Council sensors detected the movement too late. High Admiral, multiple massive objects on collision course with our fleet. Corvesh stared at the display in horror. The humans weren't just defending their planets. They were weaponizing their entire solar system. All ships, emergency maneuvers. Get out of their path. But changing course takes time, especially for large warships. The asteroids, pushed by powerful fusion drives, slammed into the Council formation. Some ships managed to dodge. Many didn't. The impacts were catastrophic. Counselor Vexnar watched the tactical display from the safety of the rear position and finally understood what they were facing. These weren't civilized beings following rules of warfare. These were survivors who would use anything, sacrifice anything to remain free. All forces retreat to the rally point, Vexnar ordered. Immediate withdrawal. The Council fleet fled the solar system, leaving behind over 400 destroyed or disabled ships. Hundreds more were damaged. The humans had lost approximately 1/3 of their forces, but they had won something far more important. They had proven that humans could not be conquered easily. On Earth, people emerged from shelters to see their world was still free. Cities had been damaged, thousands had died, but they had survived. Admiral Pierce received the casualty reports with a heavy heart. So many dead, so many ships lost. Lieutenant Morrison, now promoted to commander, stood beside him. "Sir, was it worth it?" she asked quietly. Pierce looked down at Earth, still beautiful despite the damage. "Yes, because now they know. We won't bow. We won't submit. We'll fight for our freedom no matter the cost. That message is worth every sacrifice." In the asteroid belt, Frank Martinez and his surviving miners gathered on an emergency communication channel. They had lost friends. They had lost ships. But they had also proven that ordinary people, not just trained soldiers, could stand against the Council. "We did good work," Martinez told them. "My grandfather would be proud." On Mars, Colonel Phillips walked through the damaged defense grid. Much would need to be rebuilt. But Mars was still human, still free. Dr. Jung compiled data on everything they had learned from the battle. Every tactic that worked, every weapon that failed, every lesson paid for in blood would be remembered and used to make humanity stronger. Commander Helen Foster, whose Neptune wing had fought through both battles, sat exhausted in her quarters. Her ship was damaged but intact. Her crew had survived. For now, that was enough. Captain Jake Sullivan brought his carrier back to the Mars shipyards for repairs. The Defiant had lived up to its name. It was battered, scarred, but still functional, like humanity itself. The Galactic Council, meanwhile, had to face a new reality. They had sent 1,500 ships against one species and failed. The losses were staggering. The political fallout would be enormous. In the Grand Chamber, delegates argued about what to do next. Some called for even more ships. Others suggested negotiation. A few quietly wondered if conquering humanity was worth the cost. Councillor Vexnar stood before them, its shimmering form somehow dimmer than before. We must acknowledge the truth. Humanity cannot be easily conquered, perhaps not conquered at all, unless we commit resources that would leave us vulnerable elsewhere. We must consider alternatives. Ambassador Torvin, who had warned them from the beginning, spoke quietly. I told you these humans were different. They would rather die than submit. We should have... Part 5. 3 months after the failed invasion, the Galactic Council met again in the Grand Chamber. The mood was very different from before. Gone was the confidence and certainty. Now there was worry, anger, and something the Council had rarely experienced. Doubt. Councillor Vexnar stood before the assembled delegates and spoke words that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. We must acknowledge reality. Humanity cannot be conquered through military force, at least not without losses that would cripple our own ability to maintain order in other regions of the galaxy. The Kreth Dominion's delegate, whose species had contributed heavily to both failed invasions, spoke with barely controlled rage. They destroyed over 600 of our ships. 600. Entire species have been absorbed into the Council for far less resistance than this. Which proves my point exactly, Ambassador Torvin replied. We assumed humanity would behave like every other emerging species. We thought they would submit when faced with overwhelming force. We were wrong. They met our force with absolute determination and tactical brilliance. We failed to understand our enemy. So what do you propose? Another delegate demanded. We cannot simply ignore them. They continue to expand their colonies. They refuse to acknowledge our authority. If we do nothing, we appear weak to the entire galaxy. The debate raged for hours. Some wanted to gather an even larger fleet and try again. Others pointed out that such an effort would leave other parts of the galaxy undefended. Some suggested blockading the solar system. Others noted that human ships could probably break any blockade. Finally, a new approach emerged. It wasn't what the Council wanted. But it was the only realistic option left. A message was sent to Earth. This time it contained no threats or ultimatums. It was a simple proposal, a non-aggression pact. Humanity would be granted autonomy in their region of space. In return, they would agree to respect Council territorial claims and engage in regulated trade with Council species. Admiral Pierce read the message in his office. Commander Kate Morrison, who had been promoted and now served as his chief of staff, waited for his reaction. Pierce read the message twice, then laughed. It was a sound without much humor. They're trying to put us in a box. A larger box than before, but still a box. They're saying we can be free as long as we stay in our corner and don't bother them. What should we tell them, sir? Pierce thought for a long moment, looking out at Earth below. We tell them we'll consider their proposal. But we make it very clear that we don't need their permission to exist. We'll talk because it serves our interests, not because they demand it. And we'll keep building our military. Keep expanding. Keep doing what we've always done. The negotiations that followed were unlike anything the Galactic Council had experienced before. Humanity didn't send politicians trained in making nice and avoiding conflict. They sent military veterans like Colonel Ryan Phillips. They sent scientists like Dr. Lisa Zhang. They sent people who understood that real diplomacy was backed by the ability to defend yourself. The talks took place on a neutral space station at the edge of human territory. The Council delegates arrived expecting humans to be grateful for the opportunity to negotiate. Instead, they found themselves facing people who acted like equals. Let me be clear, Colonel Phillips said during the first session. We're not here to ask permission. We're here to establish mutual understanding. You respect our territory. We respect yours. But we won't be limited in our expansion into unclaimed space. And we won't disarm our military. A Council delegate objected. You cannot dictate terms to us. We represent 47 species. And we represent one species that beat your combined forces twice. Dr. Zhang replied calmly. Numbers don't seem to be the deciding factor here, do they? The negotiations were difficult. The Council wanted restrictions on human military buildup. Humanity refused. The Council wanted oversight of human colonies. Humanity refused. The Council wanted humanity to acknowledge Council authority. Humanity absolutely refused. But slowly an agreement took shape. It wasn't what the Council wanted, but it was an agreement they could live with. Humanity would be recognized as an independent power. They could expand into unclaimed regions of space. They could maintain whatever military forces they deemed necessary. They would respect the territorial claims of existing Council members. In return, humanity agreed to limited trade agreements. They agreed not to attack Council members without provocation. And they agreed to one clause that surprised many: mutual defense. If any Council member faced an existential threat, humanity would consider requests for military assistance. The Council delegates initially rejected this as presumptuous. Why would they need help from a species they had just been fighting? Ambassador Torvin explained it to them. Because they're not asking to join the Council. They're positioning themselves as partners, equals who might help us if we need it. It's actually brilliant. They're saying they're strong enough that we might want their help someday. The final treaty was signed 6 months after humanity's 2-word response to the original ultimatum. It wasn't a complete peace. It was more like a very cold understanding. But it was better than continued war. On Earth, the news was met with celebration and continued vigilance. People were happy the fighting had stopped. But they also understood that peace only lasted as long as you could defend it. Admiral Jake Sullivan, promoted after his performance in the war, took command of the outer system defenses. He spoke to his fleet with his usual bluntness. We won because we were willing to pay a price they weren't. We were willing to die for our freedom. But don't mistake this peace for friendship. The Council respects strength, nothing else. The moment we appear weak, they'll come back. So we stay sharp. We stay ready. We stay dangerous, his fleet responded with determination. They had learned the same lesson. Frank Martinez and the other belt miners returned to their work, but now they did so with military contracts and official recognition. The asteroids they mined would fuel humanity's continued expansion and provide materials for more warships. Just in case Dr. Lisa Zhang continued developing new weapons, because while peace was good, being prepared for war was better. She had dozens of projects in development, each one designed to make humanity more dangerous than before. Betty Parker on the lunar base was already building the next generation of defense platforms. These would be even more powerful than the ones that had helped save Earth. She worked with the same determination she had shown during the war. Peace didn't mean you could relax. It meant you had time to prepare. On Mars, Colonel Phillips oversaw the reconstruction of the defensive grid, but he also expanded it, making the Red Planet an even stronger fortress than before. We'll never be caught unprepared again, he told his staff. Never. Admiral Pierce, now nearing retirement, stood once more on the observation deck of the command station. Beside him was Commander Greg Hamilton, who had become his protege during the war. Do you think it's really over, sir? The conflict with the Council? Pierce shook his head slowly. No, this is just the beginning. We've proven we can defend ourselves. Now comes the harder part. Finding our place in a galaxy that isn't sure it wants us. We'll make mistakes. We'll have conflicts. But we'll do what humans have always done. We'll adapt. We'll overcome. We'll survive. And if they attack us again, Pierce's expression became hard as steel. Then we remind them why threatening humanity is a bad idea. We make the cost so high they never try again. Across the galaxy, the Council's member species began studying humanity with new interest. Not as primitives to be managed, but as a real power to be considered. Some saw potential for profitable trade. Some saw opportunities for military alliance. Others saw a long-term threat that would need to be watched carefully. But all agreed on one thing. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage not as newcomers seeking acceptance, but as warriors who had earned their place through combat. They had proven they couldn't be bullied. They had proven they couldn't be easily conquered. They had proven they were dangerous. The Galactic Council's age of unquestioned authority had ended. A new era had begun, one where humanity's voice would be heard whether the Council wanted to listen or not. In schools across Earth, children learned about the war. They learned about Admiral Pierce's 2-word response. They learned about the battles, the sacrifices, the victory. And they learned the most important lesson: never surrender your freedom. In military academies on Mars and Luna, new officers trained for the next conflict. Because everyone knew there would be a next conflict. Peace was just the time between wars. The important thing was being ready. Human colonies continued spreading across unclaimed space. Each new settlement was built with defense in mind. Each new station had weapons. Each new ship carried more firepower than would seem necessary. Because humanity had learned that in the galaxy, you were only as free as you were strong. The cold response to the Council's ultimatum had become more than just 2 words. It had become humanity's philosophy. It had become their creed. When threatened, humans didn't negotiate from weakness. They responded with strength. They made the cost of aggression too high to consider, and in the darkness between stars, human ships continued their expansion. They carried with them a message that